We're ready. All right. All right. Good evening, everybody. Hello. Hello. 5 o'clock. Call the steering committee for the Performing Arts Center meeting to order. And if we could do the roll call, please.
Absolutely. Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Judy Carlson.
Here.
Lindsay Rinaldi.
Here.
Marianne Malizi Golia.
Present.
Rich Lannon.
Yep.
Mary Lou Blaisdell.
Here.
Trish Klee.
Here.
Tracy Hall.
Here.
Mark Thayer will not be joining us this evening. Mayor Jim Donchis will not be joining us this evening. And then lastly, Brendan Loss.
Here.
With 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. With 8 people here, we have quorum.
Perfect. Thank you. I guess we're going to turn this right over to Ned and call you.
So it's Ned and I who are here to talk to you about the handout that you have in front of you, which hopefully you all have a copy of, and we sent it to you.
Extra you did. I left it on my desk.
Yeah, I got a small one too here too.
We sent it to you in advance.
Thank you, dear.
The goal this evening, does everyone have a copy?
Yeah, so much easier.
Do folks,
Right.
Do we have an extra, I mean, there's,
anyone else interested?
Yeah, and I got an extra small one too if we need it.
I got an extra small one. I have an extra small one. I can hardly read.
And then
We're getting old.
All these bad eyes.
And it's up on the screen. The goal for this evening, the exercise this evening, is to make sure we're all in agreement on a pathway forward. And we have essentially 3 options, but really I'd like to focus on just option 1, revised, and option 2. And make sure we are all in alignment, in some sort of agreement with moving forward. And I ask this of you because we need to continue proceeding with the architectural design. Right now, we're in design development, and we're holding steady there. If you will, and I was explaining this to Rich earlier this afternoon, and this is just approximations. We scoped out design development for approximately 12 weeks. We're approximately 6 weeks in. If we were to continue designing and not have clear consensus, we would be burning through our budget, and I want to make sure that we don't do that. So until we have some clear consensus, I think it's wise to hold. That's what I meant by that pause phrase last night, and proceeding through design development. So that way we stay on that 8-week schedule, which we're currently, again, I would say approximately 50%. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Around there?
Yeah, the design, we're by the calendar halfway through design
Yeah.
development, but in terms of the level of design, we're really still at schematic.
Okay, so we still have more like 12 weeks to go through design development.
Tim, could I ask you, because people are watching, to just describe what these are? You talked about our option 1 revised and option 2,
Yep.
please.
Yep, I will get there. And hopefully Ned will correct me where I error, but I want to, again, just set the expectations for this evening. So with that being said, the next step was to kind of just outline the differences between schematic design, option 1 revised, and then option 2. So option schematic design, if everyone recalls, that was the floor plans that we all designed and built and had everything from the piano storage to the orchestra pit to the curved seating. I'm sorry.
The gallery.
To the gallery, to all of that, all inclusive, right? And then from there, we did this revised version, and that revised version took some things out, and that's what this matrix basically does for you. Is it? I don't have one in front of me, so what it basically does is the matrix calls out the differences in each one of the schemes that you have before you. So you have again schematic design, which was that full bells and whistles, everything that we were looking for type of design. Then we have the option 1 revised, which brought the project down when we did our cost estimates, but didn't bring the project down enough to meet the budget that we were looking for, so which is how we ended up at option 2. And so what I'd like to go through this evening is just walk you through the various trade-offs, if you will, or the differences in each concept. And so hopefully to gather enough consensus that we can be able to move forward. So starting under building features, roof terrace. So we had that in the first option. We took it out in option 1 revised. In option 2 revised, we can add it in. But to do that in either option, it's going to cost additional money above and beyond what's outlined in the above you. So again, and when I say above you, just to talk about construction costs, we know that the schematic design was 16.3. We know option 1 was just over 15, and we know option 2 is just over 14. So you would need to add $100,000 into the $15 million figure, or you'd need to add $200,000 into the 14.1 figure. So next item is the elevator. Again, a second elevator was included in both schematic design and in option 2. We would need to add it back into the option 1 revised. The monument stair is in the first option. And then in the 2 other schemes, it doubles as a fire stair. Programming in the basement was, again, originally conceived in the schematic design. We brought down the basement to just the restrooms in the mechanical design, into the mechanical room, I believe is what I should be saying. And then, again, in the option 2 mechanical room and just crossover space, so there wouldn't even be restrooms in the basement. So the basement would be pretty much left untouched in option 2. The lobby square footage, just a tick over 1,000 in schematic design, just under 5,000 in option 1 revised, and actually just under 6,000 in option 2. Lobby square footage floor openings. Ned, can you speak to what that is?
Double height spaces, so 2-story spaces. It's a little odd because it's a whole. You don't actually count the square footage. It's just telling you the difference from scheme to scheme and what has more or less.
And so that's like the volume that you'd fare of like air, right, in the lobby area. So that would be, again, about 1,300 in schematic design, about 1,100 in option 1 revised, and about 500 in option 2. Audience chamber size. So audience chamber size is about 3,200. 3,200 in option 1 revised, and about 3,500 in option 2. We have a table and chair diagram for this. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Or you have it in your pad.
Basically the same.
You got it? So, as you can see, in schematic design, we had about 320 seats. Schematic design option 1 revised, we had about 320 seats, and then in option 2, we have 320 seats. Those are all 10 tables, 10 round tables. That was a question that came up, I know, 2 weeks ago.
So, quick question if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
So the difference in option 2, it looks like we're adding 250 square feet, but no additional seating.
We changed it from going one direction to another direction. Tracy wasn't here at the last meeting. So instead of going this way, it goes this way.
That I figured out,
Yeah.
but it still adds 250 square feet with no additional seating. What's that additional 250 square feet for?
You could add over and above that. We didn't test it beyond 320, but I'm just here to answer questions, so I'll do that. The side aisles, so to speak, are wider in option 2, which is purely a result of the planning. We didn't extend the tables beyond it because there are actually columns that are supporting the parterre seating.
Okay.
But you could put a couple tables in there if you
You could,
wanted.
a couple tables, you could have the serving,
Stations in there.
stations in there. It's just a little bit more generous in
Thanks.
that area.
So it sounds like you get a little bit more of a benefit on the tables and chairs setup if you go with option 2. Gallery. So dedicated space and schematic design. We have it as part of the lobby in option 1 revised, and we have it part of the lobby as option 2. So VIP lounge. It is carried in schematic design. We deleted it in option 1. Of course, it could be added back in for an additional cost, I should say.
Option 1 is actually a space limitation.
Oh, is that what that
Yes,
is?
you could.
So we can't add VIP lounge back in option 1. See, that's why we have you here. Thank you, Ned. So I was I was like begging you to come tonight.
I'm just standing behind your shoulder here.
And so then, and it is included in the cost estimate above for option 2.
Question?
Yes.
Back on the gallery space, in option 2, it was a larger gallery space, wasn't it, than the previous one?
Yeah, it was the kind of linear
Yeah, the
gallery.
really linear, long, much larger gallery space.
Yeah, there had been earlier questions about being able to secure the gallery, and that's really only possible in option 1.
Right.
Yeah.
And then again, as far as the space for the VIP lounge, there's just no space in the revised option 1, but there is in 2, obviously.
That's,
But what-
the apartment building is more efficiently used in option 2, so that's why the square footages tend to be a little higher on that one.
Okay.
Moving on to theater features. So fly space, we carried fly space at 59 feet in schematic design. We brought it down to 49 feet in option 1 revised, and we are not carrying any fly space in option 2.
None. No fly space.
No fly space.
And that's, if I may?
Yes.
That's because of the way we've reoriented it, so we're not using the apartment building.
Correct. The rigging is consistent across all 3. So you can move scenery in option 2 horizontally, because the wings are the same, but it doesn't have the vertical height to do a full fly like option 1, or a partial fly, which is option 2, full fly schematic design, partial fly option 1, no fly option 2.
Okay, so I guess back to the earlier comment about the apartment building being used more efficiently. It's only being used to give us the option for additional lobby space and VIP space because we're not using it for fly space because we've reoriented it.
Correct.
So I guess for me personally, more efficient doesn't necessarily capture it. It's just being used differently and impacts how we use the space differently. Thank you.
So, hanging space. So there's ability to hang in option 1, schematic design, option 1 revised, and we can hang in option 2. Rigging and pipes is carries through in all the options. Orchestra pit as a potential add-on. Again, that would be a cost that we would have to factor in above and beyond the costs that were outlined above, but we would have the ability to do that. Stage dimensions are the same in all 3 options. Stage crossover is in schematic design stage level, option 1 at stage level, and then option 2, it's with the basement. Accessible lift to stage is available in schematic design, and I do not believe it is available in the other 2 options. Loading, you have loading ability at 650 square feet adjacent to the stage in both schematic design and option 1 revised, and then in option 2 it's brought down to 225 and it's direct to the stage. Types of events. So just to make sure we're staying consistent with the events, we can do amplified music on all three. We can do unamplified music is not possible in all three, and I think that's probably meaning more what the specialists
That's the
were
acoustic.
referring to with the acoustics. Of course, we could still do it.
Well, no, unamplified gets very specific. It's a different solution. So that's if you're going to kind of symphonic music or.
Okay, that's what I was,
Yeah.
okay, so that's the symphonic music type of scenario. Comedians and speakers can happen in all three. Dance can happen in all three. Drama can happen in all three. Musicals with flown scenery can happen in schematic design and can happen in option 1 revised. It is not possible in option 2. But I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, and Pete, we have you here. It's pretty fair to say, though, in this market, it's not likely that we would actually see flown scenery. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, for most of those tours that are coming in, as we've said before, Broadway tours with a necessity for full fly aren't really targeting 750 seat venues.
Okay.
So the distinction between SD and option 1 is that don't have the same capability. You are losing 10 feet, so you're getting a partial fly. And in option 2, you're really traveling from side to side, rather than up and down with any center.
But it wouldn't necessarily be a loss per se, because we don't really have a market where people are
Yeah,
gonna be
I think
looking for
most
that.
of the shows that we'd be targeting are used to having to adapt to
Yeah.
a variety of different technical circumstances, and among them would be venues without flying.
Thank you.
Question? The local use, the local groups, both in Nashua, Manchester, and some of the college groups, if they used it, they use flies.
Yeah, that's
So
where,
how many nights are you losing revenue by going with option 2?
very hard to say, I really,
Yeah,
but
I'd say
that's a kind of a crystal ball question, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, my guess is not.
Yeah, my guess is
Yeah, I
mine
mean,
too.
it would be minimal, I think. It's hard to say without knowing exactly what type of interest we would find from those groups. If they were specifically targeting that venue for production,
Yeah.
they would perhaps be able to tailor to those technical limitations. But where we might find an issue is if they're playing somewhere else that has that capability and wants to bring the same production into this venue. That would be challenging.
The only group that I know that does that is actors, singers.
They're not intending to use the venue either, unless something happens to.
Right, but that's my understanding. The only group that would, this scenario may be applicable to
Right.
is really actors, singers,
And as long as the Keith's there, they're gonna use the Keith.
that's my understanding.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Musicals without flown scenery is acceptable in all three options. Sightlines, C attached. So, again, this was an explicit question that came up last time around, so I wanted to make sure we addressed it, which just shows, we know we had capability for 750 with good quality sight lines at schematic design. I think that's fair to say with option 1 revised, and I'll let Ned speak a little bit more on it about option 2, but I believe that's also the case with option 2.
It is true. The sightlines have been verified by Fisher Dax for both options. The biggest difference is in the depth of the audience chamber. So in option 2, it's a shallower depth, and the balcony is steeper in that regard. And Fisher Dax pointed out that one of the benefits of the steeper angle is that the sound mix area is not obstructing the seats behind it, because it's slightly lower than in option option 1. Otherwise, from an audience experience point of view, they're identical. I think we've already mentioned that the curved seating works in all, or we'll get to it in a second. There is an audience experience issue that will come up when we go through the document a little bit further.
I also like that the furthest seats are 20 feet closer to the stage.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, that
kind of a
was
selling point for me.
But how much higher are they?
Well, the riser height is
It's the same height.
from tier to tier, but the height of the balcony is identical.
So, I'm no expert in performing arts centers, as we all know, but I will say, I was in London over the weekend. That sounds a little pretentious.
Well, or
See
a
what that-
lot.
On the private charter.
So you couldn't have planned it to be there when the Red Sox playing the Yankees?
I
I
missed
know,
it.
right?
I missed it. My
One
father
week.
tried getting tickets. I know. We planned it bad, but we did go see a bunch of shows. And one of the things I was commenting to Ned on
Business expense.
no. Don't think it wasn't suggested. But no. I was commenting to Ned, which, I went to 3 theaters in the West End, and I was explaining to Ned, and he more accurately described it better than I, which was I enjoyed my experience much more when I felt like I was closer to the stage, because it created a much more intimate feel, as opposed to when I was at venues where I was more set back and I felt like I was at a stadium. So I give you that context as well, because I thought that was really a really interesting point that I think that this option 2 provides a benefit of, which is I think if I was a touring act and I wanted to enjoy the experience with my patrons and my fans who were there, you'd really get that by being more intimate and having that closer feeling in option 2. But again, I digress. I just wanted to make that editorial comment.
Ned, is it also cheaper to wire it for sound because there's a smaller?
We didn't get to that level of detail,
All right.
but it's a shorter volume, so
Yeah.
it's probably going to have some.
Relative to seat count, again, I know that this came up 2 weeks ago. I just want to make sure we're addressing it, which is the 750 seats can be maintained in all 3 options.
So this is specifically option 2, because you've all seen option 1 previously. And this is, as I said, Tim, this is where our specialists pay off. They managed to get the curved seating to work. We, in our earlier studies, didn't see how it was possible, so that was good news.
So that's one thing to make sure folks know is if there's an ambition and you'd like to see curved seating in all 3 options, you can have the curved seating in all 3 options. Whereas originally we were thinking it wouldn't be possible in option 2.
And in this one here, just the outside edges, just the balcony or whatever you put the parterre on the side, they have partial view, so that means they just can't see stage left or stage right
A little bit, a little clip off. Yeah.
And then I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, that seating analysis is done for a view of the upstage wall.
That's correct.
So,
Yeah.
in other words, those partial view seats, for most concerts, they're not going to set too far back. You might have much less obstruction if you're only playing 15 feet from the proscenium.
You'd have
instead of
virtually
30.
none at that point. Yeah, and if you hung a curtain to create a cross aisle at stage level, which is an option, that would be even closer, because you'd have a 5-foot less depth. The other thing that Fisher Dax offered on this is, because we have a wider audience chamber, the parterre level seating that's in the seat count is what's in the diagram here, but you'll see there is additional space behind them. That's essentially sort of bonus space for the GA standing room. Yeah. So if all those movable seats were gone, you would have people occupying that full parterre level. We're not counting it in the 750 because they wouldn't be good seats for sightlines. So the big catch, because I don't want you to miss it, and it's significant, is the balcony in the schematic design scheme and,
Oh,
and the option 1 scheme is accessed off the 3rd floor. In order to make the numbers work in option 2, it's accessed off the 4th floor. And we have vetted this with Pete, and he pointed out that extra floor is a somewhat of a negative in terms of the audience experience. You've got to go further to get to your destination. We did do studies trying to get it at the 3rd floor, and it drops the seat count down.
Acoustics. So acoustics, I believe, is consistent in all 3 designs.
So the Centec reviewed these, said it's virtually identical, possibly some benefit to option 2 because of, again, the depth issue.
Site, so relative to site conditions, transformer on the property is not possible in schematic design, is possible in option 1 revised, and it looks like it would not be possible in option 2, but if you recall, we had discussed always putting it in an adjacent parking lot that was very close to the Performing Arts Center, but that's one issue. Second, loading dock for dumpster. There's a loading dock in schematic design. It'd be adjacent to loading in option 1 revised, and then it would be back in option 2. Building exterior.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a quick question on this? This particular design, is this for schematic 2? I mean, for design 2?
That's option 2.
That's
Option 2, okay. So in option 2, as far as seats that would be partial view or so, we're looking at like 20 seats?
Yes. Yeah.
On each side, so 40
It's
seats
actually,
total?
it's actually true in all the schemes.
Okay, and all of it, too, yeah, okay. So that's pretty typical then. Sorry.
No. Building exterior, so expression similar to rendering is schematic 1. I'm sorry, schematic design, similar to rendering in option 1 revised, and then there would be some slight variations in option 2. And that's relative to, well, why don't you speak a little bit to that?
Well, I think we'd shown you, last time we saw you, the massing difference between the schematic design rendering and option 2. That's fundamentally, a slight variation, but the material treatment that we've been talking about, the amount of glass, the use of metal panels, it would all be consistent with that.
So then, again, materials would all be the same. Entrances, so in schematic design, it was off of Main Street. In option 1 revised, it stayed off of Main Street, and then in option 2, you'd have it on Main Street and West Pearl/Garden. So I believe that's everything. Yeah. For just differentials, that we wanted to make sure we called out the pluses and the minuses on the various options. Again, going back to the budget at the top, when we costed out schematic design, we were at 16.3. Option 1 revised is at 15, and then option 2 was at just a little bit over 14. So there's about $1 million difference in the budget, in the differing schemes. And I'll just conclude my comments by saying option 2 makes the 12.5 building and demo budget that we had always discussed. Option 1 is about $1 million more than that, and schematic design is a few $1 million. 2.3. Here.
Just going back to the roof terrace, on option 2, there's like things written about it, and could you explain that a little more? How
It's
it's
much more
different?
challenging to get, there is space for a terrace. The problem is getting the accessibility to it, because the elevator's now in the apartment building. So getting from the apartment building to the Main Street roof would require more work and more money in order to
Okay.
do that.
But it's still possible, the same
Still
size?
possible, and then the other, it's a little smaller, The other note is, in lieu of that, the schematic rendering also shows a kind of balcony right over the entrance at the second floor. That's still possible. So you could say, okay, let's not spend the money on the third floor terrace, but let's look at putting a balcony on the second floor.
That was that small balcony that.
Right.
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, on line 11, 12, and 13, it says in million, well, any of them say in FF&E, like audiovisual. What does that really mean?
So there's a separate budget for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and that includes all of the audiovisual equipment, all the theatrical equipment, and all the loose furniture in the project.
So the $1 million for AV in line 11 includes all the AV equipment
Correct.
and all the, and all the
Theatrical equipment.
other equipment, the curtain, staging, all that stuff is included in
Yes.
that line.
Yes. Everything but seating, which is carried separately.
And where's that carried?
There's
Number 12.
another line for that?
12.
12 is the telescope.
Telescopic
Page 12, the
Well,
telescopic seating.
okay, now one other question. Looks like contingency is around 10%.
That's the CM contingency?
Yeah.
Which is a separate, it's basically part of the construction cost as opposed to the owner's contingency.
Okay, so that CM contingency in option 2, 1.375, is just a little less than 10%.
Yeah.
And the other one is, it's about 10%, a little over 10%.
So it
It's more than
scales.
just contingency.
Right.
Does that,
You lump other items into that.
Yes, so it includes the
Pre-construction fees.
general conditions, the CM's contingency, pre-construction fee, there's a bunch of stuff in it, but it does tend to get tied into the cost of the building,
yeah,
and as the cost goes down, the
does it include
CM.
inflation? Does that include escalation? Or
It does, no,
Okay, does it include your fee, the fee of the,
no.
so does that include your fee?
No, this is just construction costs, the soft costs are all calculated separately.
So where are the fees included?
Fees, they're not on this, so
Right.
there's, you got.
Yeah, it's a whole, that's in the other budget.
Yeah.
The
So we're
overall
only,
budget.
we're only looking at the building cost.
Well, the folks here are looking at the total cost.
Well, and we have been, yeah.
So, that's what I'm saying, you got about 10% in contingencies, but you got escalation costs, fees, typically I've seen numbers like 20%, jobs I've been involved in. Seems to me the 10% is low, so I wonder how much is hidden, how much of the cost that you would normally expect to get incurred, like fees, how much is that?
Nothing is hidden. Tim went through it last time in a great deal of detail, and there it is again.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, what Fred is referring to is all the other items that would be in this document. And if we were to change, and I didn't prepare this document this evening, so it may need to be tweaked here and there a little bit, but it gives you an order of magnitude type of understanding. If we were to change, really just, the goal is to just change line 9 to whatever folks decide. If we want to go with option 1, we'll call it 15. That's the zero there. 15 million, that means we're at a $23 million project. So then it goes back to the other point, which was sources of funds, which is if we do everything right and everything goes according to plan, the best we have is 23.2. So that gets back to the comments I made 2 weeks ago, which is how risk adverse are we? And what do you really want to go for? And what are you trying to do? And that's literally the why I'm trying to have this conversation with you.
And Tim, let me step back for a second, I didn't quite get an answer. You have a cost here, let's take option 2, of $14.175 million. And that includes the trade cost, which I guess is a construction cost, your trade, your labor, and your contingency numbers. But you say, what I'm looking for is the total number of six.
You're looking for
Any
total
missing
project
costs.
You're looking for.
That's what Tim's.
That's what we're doing now, that's what we're looking at now, is the total
So
project
I need
cost.
to know the total cost, so what is, how does that 14.175,
So if you
what
plug
does that
that in.
become?
Yeah, it'll be down to
22.2.
I like that, okay, 14.75 can be 22.2.
Okay.
You said it's 22.2?
Yeah, 22.2.
So just to clarify if I
Yeah.
might, so 14, I'm gonna say 14
175.
million, just to make
Right.
it a nice round number, but if it's 14 million instead of 16 million, that, whatever number gets put in there is strictly cost of the building. It's not the architectural fees, it's
Correct.
not the capital campaign assorted fees, it's not anything else. It's one line item out of this overall budget that's up on the screen, not in anyone's handout. So if you're looking at the impact on the overall cost of the project, it's what's on the screen, not what's in the handout. The handout is a blow-up of
Line
line
number
9.
That's
right?
exactly right.
So this that we got as a handout is the details behind line number 9 that's up on the screen.
Okay, let me just cut to the chase then. Where it says the cost of the package, I did my own calculations, okay? So if I take the functionality design, instead of, what is that total pack cost? That includes the building and everything else. And for option 1, option 2, like, I got 21.1 million for the schematic design, but apparently it's more than that. So what are those three numbers? The total cost, the total project.
Mhm.
What is that number, Tim?
I'm doing it right now. And then if I did it for, I mean, I feel like we shouldn't even do it for schematic design, but.
Well,
if
it
we-
should be on the sheet there that you have.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I have it, I have it.
I mean, it should be on the spreadsheet.
Yeah, but he's changing the numbers to give you that number for all three, he's just
Yeah.
changing that one
Right,
sheet.
those three columns don't correlate to the three columns that you have in front of you. That's an overall project budget that it has the budget on column E. Column G is what's been allocated for date per se, and column I is your variance. So it's your cost for each.
Yeah.
Right, Tim, do you have the total project cost for each three?
Yeah, do you want it?
Yes, so Tim's gonna tell us,
So total project costs for schematic design would be 24.434 million.
4-3,
24.434 million.
okay.
Carl, does that jive with you? Does that make sense? Just correct me if I get this wrong.
No,
Yeah.
the only thing you have to do is change number 9 and put in the.
Right.
which is what he did, yeah.
Which is
Yeah,
what I
that's
did.
what
Yes.
And
So-
then it'll calculate
That's-
itself
So,
at the
so,
bottom.
so it's 24.434 on schematic design.
Original design.
That's the original.
Original.
Option 1 revised is 23,134. Option 2 is 22,259.
Okay, and that is geared against the 15.5 million that you have been authorized.
Correct.
So the difference is that you have to raise about $9 million for the schematic design from other sources. You have to raise about 8 million, $7.5 million, $7.6 million for the option 1, and you have to raise about $6.8 million, 6.7 for option number 2. Is that
That's right.
doable?
That's-
Any
yeah,
of
that's
that
about right.
doable?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
pretty much been the plan between the
Yeah.
new market tax credits and the capital campaign committee fundraising.
Which of these is realistic?
That's a good question.
Well, I guess,
That's a good question.
no, it is. I mean, obviously, the most realistic would be the less amount because it's easier to do. It's a question whether the others are also realistic is the question that we have to ask ourselves, or how we get the extra money.
I think option 1 is more realistic than the schematic, absolutely, without a
Yes.
doubt. And I think there are a lot of
But
people working hard.
like
to
Tim
get
said
it
at the
done.
beginning, we're looking at the schematic just to compare where we started. That's not what it is anymore anyways. It's really between option 1 and 2, I assume. is what we're looking at. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody, I don't think we're going back to the schematic. It's a matter of making some concessions, it's a question of option 1 with some and option 2 with more. And obviously option 2, you know, again, Fred, you know, the dollars, the lower you are, the closer you are, and the less money you gotta raise, it's easier. It's a question whether option 1 is worth trying to get that money in some fashion, whatever we can discuss here, because option 1 is a much better project or not, is what we gotta decide.
Well, I think the schematic design is a much better option, so.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Well-
You think what?
The basic.
The original.
system.
Oh, you think the original schematic design?
Oh, and I agree, it's
We
a
all
better
do.
option, it's a matter of whether it's
I
feasible.
think you're too much focused on the money, because you have to be realistic, the difference in what was authorized
Mhm.
and the cost of this project is a very large number. It's about a third of the authorized bond. In fact, it's more than that now. It's almost half of that now. You're 50% on the budget, roughly. You're trying to get this money from sources of which very little has been identified thus far. In my opinion, the current market you're not gonna get $6.5 million, you're not gonna get close to that. The personal contribution, I haven't heard of a penny yet being raised. So you probably have to go back to the city of Nashville, which I've been saying now for 3 months.
Mhm.
Tell these aldermen that are sitting here, there's 3 or 4 of them sitting here, to go back and bond for the additional money. I mean, you have to bite the bullet. You cannot build a theater that's substandard. And the differences between these options fails compare what's really realistically available. So you're gonna have to bite the bullet, decide between you what is the best theater to have, and worry less about the money. Because money-wise, you're not there. Money-wise, you can all go home. It's up to the alderman to get the additional money from it. If I were an alderman, I go out right now, and I put my name as sponsor, about $6 or $7 million, maybe $10 million additional. The city does not bond anything. It does short-term notes. It doesn't bond until the project is completed. That Mr. Dow can tell you.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what you bond, as long as you don't spend to the very top of what you bond. City typically does spend to the very top of what you bond, because you always find reasons to spend more money. But if you go back and say, I need this money, I need $24 million to build this project, I got $15.5 million, spending on a half, I got $15.5 million authorized, I need another $9 million, on the bond for $9 million. I probably won't spend it all, because I hope to collect some money from private contributions, and I'll do all that accounting after the structure is done. In fact, you need some money in reserve for capital improvements later on. You're gonna need some money in reserve for maintenance. You know, you're not even counting that.
Yeah, I think, your
Yeah.
reserve is in that number.
Yeah.
Correct, it is. I'm carrying 1.2.
Correct.
Are you okay, 1.2 million?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for reserve,
That
so
was-
that we
that
get
was the
covered.
original
But
budget.
the rest of it, you're correct, but
Yeah.
the
So
reserve.
So you're
is-
right, I mean, you're right on.
But you all need to go back and get $9 million for bond with the proposition that whatever you raise from private money, you won't, no, that's the bond. You won't.
All right, there's 5 aldermen here, can I call a vote? No.
So what I want to make sure, and if the
Is it
group-
okay to put the light back on? I mean, I don't know if everybody, I don't care.
Yeah.
Is it?
No,
I think
yeah.
we finished, but
Yeah, why don't we just,
I mean,
we can
it's,
turn them off again.
I don't want anybody falling asleep or anything.
Was I snoring too loud?
Yeah, really, I heard a couple of people snorting.
so my only comment as a follow-up to some of the sentiments that were just expressed, and just to make sure the group is very clear on this, if the group proceeded to want to go in that direction, it would preclude us from ever being able to achieve a new market tax credit. It would be, the new market tax credit folks would, at that point in time, not look to fund this project, because you have to qualify in economic development for what's usually referred to as the but-for test. And so, but for this
What is the number? What is-
number, then you'd be able to close the gap. So that just means the source of funds would stay to just whatever it was that the city of
What you're
Nashville
saying
was
is if we
authorizing.
went back and increased the bond right now, you're, but
lose
what,
You'd never see new market tax credit money.
what if
Right.
we waited till after we found out whether we were or weren't going to get new market tax credit?
I'm sorry, say that again?
what if the action for any additional bonding didn't take place
Until after.
until the potential of not getting any new market tax funds?
Yeah, we're trying to fix a problem we don't have yet. So let's just wait until
Yeah,
see what
there's
the
no
new
way
market
I
tax
would
credits
say
do.
nine.
Well, that would be my recommendation in a sense, is I would say I would wait, and if you know that we're absolutely precluded
Right.
from ever getting new market tax credits, then maybe you'd want to go down the path that was just suggested. What I just want to make sure you know is if you made that choice now, you'd be closed off from
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So
Good
they
to
can't
know.
rescind it once they give it to us, if we go back and say we've adjusted our budget.
They would never even give it to us. It's not like they would offer
If,
it.
if,
No, but if
wait,
they
if
did it.
after the fact, we got we got the tax credit and said, oh, we've adjusted our budget, they can't take that back from us.
Oh, no, they would.
They would take
Oh,
it back.
oh, yeah.
So they could take it back, so
But-
we can't
Can I,
No.
ever
can I say
adjust it.
something?
Well, I mean, we would do it in parallel.
Okay,
Because they would never close to transfer the money to us until all the other documents were finalized.
Okay, I see what you're
So,
saying.
so could we do it in parallel course? Yes, I think that, and I think that would be for a de minimis cost,
Uh-huh.
$1 million here, whatever it may be. But if you were looking for 5-6 million to truly close the gap, they would say, City of Nashua, you have the money to do it. You should just go and do it.
Okay, I see
We
what
have
you
so many other projects we need to fund.
Yeah.
It's better that we take our 5 million that we were gonna commit to this and give it to this
Right.
project instead.
But Tim, let's say you get 6 million from new tax credits, and this is a little over that, and we need to extend the bond $500,000, $1 million. That wouldn't impact the tax credits, would it?
I don't think something like that would, because 500,000, and I think we would do it simultaneously with the closing, but a scenario and I'm just trying to sketch this out for you, a scenario where if we funded it all 100% and we're looking for other sources so we didn't have to bond all the way up to the authorization, I don't think that would move too far off the desk of the person making a decision at the new market tax credit entity.
But also, I mean, obviously, the easy way, I mean, saying easy if the aldermen are all for it,
Right.
But to get $9 million and forget about, and the capital campaign committee can go home and the new market tax. But if you did it in between, if we go back to what we were originally looking to do, and say we still need $4.2 million in the market tax, we still want to raise $2.5 million, so can we increase the bond, any amount now, for instance? Can it be 2 million, 3 million, 4 million now, and still be okay with the new market tax credit? Obviously, if we ask for the whole thing, I understand they're gonna say, you don't need me, goodbye. But could you increase it somewhat?
Yes, again,
Now.
500,000, 1 million, 2 million, yeah, I think that's okay. One
Now.
of the things that concerns me actually is, on the flip side, and this is one of the reasons why I raised it, is we're not gonna get a new market tax credit if the private sector money that we're raising isn't there
Correct.
either.
Sure.
Because, again, they're gonna, the entity that would be making this $4 million commitment's gonna say, come back and talk to us when you have that $1 million that you're counting on from private sector money. They are risk adverse, so they don't wanna commit their sources of funds to a project if it's not ready to go.
Can I say something? Number one, I don't think there's one alderman here that is gonna wanna really go in and ask for a bond increase to whichever design we want until we have $4 million, or until we're right there. The bottom line is that $4 million come heck or high water, whether it was a, trying to think the right word.
New market tax
No,
credit.
when I'm talking, the ballot question.
Yeah, oh,
Binding
yeah,
or
well, there
non-binding.
was not
Whether it's
binding.
binding or non-binding, you are not going to get anybody that's gonna turn around and say, okay, we're gonna do this and just blanketly do this. I don't care whether we're spending that money or not, it's not gonna fly through the aldermen. So the bottom line is, we still have to go with the plan we wanna do. If we wanna say, we have all faith in this and so on, and then at the last minute, if it doesn't, then we increase the bond because we've got the $4 million and we can become shovel-ready and so on, that's different. We cannot go there now, even though I'd be all for saying, okay, let's do it. We can't do it until we've got that $4
I
million.
think you want to go with a design that you feel comfortable with.
Exactly, and then,
And worry
work
about the
towards-
financing later, because if
Exactly.
you don't get the
Yes,
private money,
exactly.
and you don't get the new market tax credits.
we're dead in the
then
water.
We're playing a
it
different
may be
ballgame at that
bonding,
point.
But
Yeah.
if you don't get the money, you're never gonna build this.
Right.
Well, and,
That's what I said.
and I guess, if you were here last meeting, but my other concern is, and I raise this because I've had some people in the community say to me, well, your goal is 4 million of new market tax credits, and then the capital campaign only needs to raise 2.5. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. That's not true. And that number of 2.5 is being tossed around, and there's this perception that if the capital campaign announces 2.5 million in private funds has been raised, then it's kind of done its job, and we don't need to raise anymore. And you and I have had this conversation, and I've said to people, no, that's like a target for kind of a minimum, but we really want as much as we can get, because there's no guarantee of what we're getting for new market tax credits. It could be anything from 0 to 6, and
The bigger the endowment, the better.
and the bigger the endowment, the better. And you know, as Tim and I talked about early on, the new market tax credit money can't go into an endowment. So it's all of this privately raised money that's going into the endowment. But I think, you know, we really need to be careful in saying, oh, the capital campaign wants to raise 2.5, because the capital campaign wants to raise as much as they can, bottom line. And, you know, if you guys came in, I think people think because we're talking 4 million roughly for new market tax credits, that 4 million of private funding is taken off, and then the capital campaign is just like this. But I'm just telling you what the perception is out there. And people, after coming to your event, said to me, well, all the capital campaign needs to do is raise 2.5. That's what I heard. And I said, no, you're not correct. So I'm just putting it out there that that's the perception when people hear, like, maybe that's what your target is. So I think we need to be careful.
I don't think that's our target at all.
That's your minimum goal.
I think that with working with the consultant, Judy, correct me if I'm wrong, we stated the fact that in surveying the potential donors
Right.
that have the means for this, we are comfortable with knowing this is what is at our fingertips right now.
Right.
Is that saying it correctly?
I think it needs to be, we need to be really clear, that number was not picked out of a hat.
Exactly.
It wasn't picked out of,
No.
we need to close a gap and therefore that's what we're gonna throw in there.
Right.
That was based on a fairly scientific, well vetted process of determining what is an achievable goal. So we can call it a minimum all we want. The results we got back from the feasibility study said that's about what we can expect to raise. You know, if miracles happened, we could raise more. But we shouldn't be going out and setting an expectation that that is a minimum amount and that we fully expect to raise a lot more, because when we don't, we're setting ourselves up that we did not hit what we told people we were gonna get. We gotta be really, really clear. That number was picked and recommended as the adopted goal for the capital campaign, because that's what we got back from the feasibility study. And by saying it's a minimum and we can raise a lot more, we are setting an expectation in other people's minds that we're gonna blow that out of the water. It'd be awesome if we could, but I'd much rather say our goal, based on data, says we will raise between 1.2 and 1.4, or whatever the exact number was, and I forget it, and over-deliver on that, then go out and say that's our minimum, 2.4 or 2.5, and only raise 2 million. Because 2 million is an awful lot of money to raise. So
It is, yeah.
let's not talk about, I mean,
And Tracy, I understand that. It's just, people are saying to me, well,
I don't know where
all
they're
they-
getting that.
but there's a perception out there, and I've heard it from people who were at your, so I just
We
feel
never
like I
mentioned the
need
word
to say,
minimum.
but no,
So I
but
don't know
that's
where
how
they're
people
hearing
are
that.
processing
so the
it.
response to that shouldn't be that it's a minimum and we could raise more. The response should be that is the goal that was set by the capital campaign as an achievable goal for this based on data from the community. And then we're not talking about minimums, maximums, or anything. But we all need to be careful that we are talking about it that way as well.
Yeah.
So that if somebody does come and say, oh, that's all we need to raise, well, that's a healthy goal for a project like this, and we're confident that we can raise it. But I'm hearing the same kinds of things, and I'm very careful to say,
And thank you
there
for
was a
your wording.
feasibility study that said this is the goal we can and should be able to achieve.
And thank you for your wording, because people have said to me, I'm kind of waiting to see how much they raise, and it's kind of like, then they won't give us much, and that's my concern.
No one's
Right.
gonna be, nobody at that level is gonna be waiting to see, nobody who's gonna give a gift that is going to significantly move the needle on this is waiting for somebody else to
I would hope not.
raise their hand first.
Lindsay? Oh,
Just want to just throw this out, and I'm not trying to scare anybody here, but these numbers are all based on a schedule. And should the schedule get pushed, as Fred alluded to, then we will be facing escalation. Right now, there's nothing in the numbers for escalation, so it's important to keep the ball moving in some fashion in order to maintain the numbers. Last year, our industry experienced just under 6%, almost 7%.
Wow.
This year, it's tracking right now, we're into 3% already, so I'm saying maybe it'll be 5, I'm hoping it's not as high as last year. I'm not trying to scare you, it's just, it's
That's reality.
something else that you're going to be dealing with should this fall off the schedule in terms of the actual purchasing dates of awards. And it's a function of giving the design team time to get the documents done and move forward. So not to add any more pressure, I just don't want you to lose hindsight of that in the back of your head, because that will be a reality that you will be facing if it does get pushed off.
Lindsay?
It seems that the scope of the conversation has like shifted a little
Yes,
bit.
we're
I
gonna-
wanted to know, would it be okay if I went back and asked some questions
Yes,
about
please.
comparing these options? I just want to take advantage of like that while you're here.
Yeah, there we go.
So on line 10, the utilities and sidewalks, for all three options, is that just to get the area functional? That's not any other extra landscaping or anything like that?
No,
Or is that now included?
That's capturing the wider sidewalk along Pearl
Okay.
Street and some other associated work outside the footprint of the building.
So is that different from what you were talking about, Tim, about how like this stuff is not in our budget? Is that now in our budget?
No, that's not in our budget. That's what this $1 million represents.
That's extra.
That's extra.
Okay.
That's the utility and the streetscaping.
Okay.
Utility relocation.
Yeah, it's the utility relocation driving that more than anything.
Okay. Where are the, on the second where are the elevators now in option 2?
Both elevators are in the apartment building.
Okay.
They're both new. We did a study of reusing the existing shaft, and it actually turned out to be more expensive.
Well, the problem you have is that elevator, believe it or not, only goes to the second floor.
Yeah.
Goes to the second floor, it never went up to the top. I actually looked down, so there's actually a cap in the shaft, and there's windows and everything else. So there's some modifications that have to be done to the shaft. Fortunately, it looks bigger on the roof than what you actually have, because the way they built it, your shaft size is gonna limit you to the size elevator that you can put in. You can still put an elevator in, but it's not going to be what according to Service, it's gonna be one of the smallest elevators that you could possibly.
So we took advantage of that and just said we're gonna put it someplace else.
Yep.
Because it's much better.
So is it one like freight or service elevator and one?
One freight elevator at the dock, near
At the dock.
the dock.
Okay.
And then the public elevator actually is up toward West Pearl Street and Garden.
That's an option 2.
That's option 2.
That's option
And
two.
option 1, it's a shared elevator
Right.
with the ability for an additional 200,000 plus to put a passenger elevator in. And we do have a placeholder in the floor plan for that. So if you say go, it can go right back in.
Tim, do you have the floor plans you can bring up?
I still had a few
Okay,
other
yeah,
like.
This is a related question.
Oh, okay.
So if we have 2 elevators in option 2, would that help with the issue of having to go up to the higher floor to go to the balcony?
Ned, the backstage elevator doesn't serve.
That's correct. It's still one public.
It's still one public.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so the problem's with backstage rather than with the audience getting up to the balcony?
Well, the issue is the audience loading from the 4th floor to the balcony. So they would come into the, up past the last row and then come down towards the front row rather than loading
Up.
at the row closest to the stage.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
Yeah, so these are out of date.
Oh, okay.
But,
Where would it be? I mean,
so what, in option 2, where we've been studying it, is the main stair actually moves over here and the elevator's right beside it.
and the freight would be?
Freight stays
Stay
right there.
right there. So if you, in option 2, the elevator's there and the elevator's there.
Great. In the basement, TBD, is that just, like, we haven't decided what we want to do with that yet,
No,
or?
the only thing happening in the basement in option 2 is the performers crossover.
Is that HVAC?
No, it's so they can, whoops, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I'll bring it back.
So if you don't hang a curtain at the back of the stage to create the cross aisle,
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
there's a stair down here and a stair up here. And so an actor would leave the stage, go down, come over, come back up and out on the other side,
And then,
which is not uncommon.
and then it's a, forgive me if I'm interpreting this wrong, on 37, accessible lift to stage, is that,
You can do that in all of them. It's only priced in option 1.
I think I just need a better definition of that. I think I don't understand what it is clearly.
So in the schematic design, we actually have a mechanical lift.
Oh, okay, so it's not necessarily like inaccessible by ADA like,
Correct.
compliant.
no.
That's what I think
Yeah,
I'm
no,
trying
this
to.
is-
Option 1, actually, you can get to the stage via a ramp
Uh-huh,
that's parallel to the audience chamber.
okay,
Option 2, we hadn't worked that out yet, but that would be the same idea.
okay.
It's always best to avoid a mechanical device for accessibility if we can.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that there was still some accessibility for performers who had
Yes.
that limitation.
Yes.
38 is the loading, and maybe this is more for Pete, but is that sufficient? To 225 square feet? Loading direct out to the stage as opposed to 650?
Yeah,
How did
that-
you arrive at that? Because don't they gain all this as loading?
It's a little misleading.
Yeah.
In option 2, it's basically direct load onto the stage. So instead of having a large, schematic in option 1, there's a big loading area here. And then you move things onto the stage from there, because the stage is there. So because of the proximity to the stage, there's more area dedicated to loading inside the building.
Internal space.
As opposed to this one where it's really just considered to be the transition
Direct
space.
on. And is there any space in option 2 that you could use as like storage or internal loading as like a transitionary space? Like if you wanted to turn over shows quickly or something like that, and you couldn't actually have like set pieces like hanging out outside. Is there like a large or elevated like height space on the stage level in the apartment building that you could use for like temporary storage?
No, and there isn't an option 1 either. Because in order
But
to get
that
option-
loading space could be used by that, like you could park some flats there or something like that for a
Not
bit.
vertically, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
And
you.
we do have an overhang over that extended dock in option 2.
Okay. And the entrances on Main and West Pearl, where's the entrance for West Pearl on option 2? Is it in the back?
So it's right here, and it connects, or the gallery connects the 2 entrances in option 2.
Is there enough office space? And I don't even know if this is something Pete would want, but is there enough office space to have box office down there too?
We actually went through a couple of iterations with Pete and his team on option 2, which we're not showing because they're not fully fleshed out.
Sure.
But the box office is actually back on Main Street in option 2. We had shown it there, and Pete felt like operationally it would be better if it were.
Yeah, there's more space for it to be out, and running 2 box offices, that,
Yeah,
the thing
logistically, I
that's
don't
nice
know if
about
that's a
the
nightmare.
entrance out to the right, out to the back on West Pearl is folks coming from that garage that already have their tickets.
Right.
We can use that as a scan point, but not as a full-service box office.
Okay, so you could
So you can
do
get
that.
into the building that way if you already have your tickets, but if you're purchasing or going to will call it's around to the front. So from an operational standpoint, staffing that appropriately and directing people saying, all right, if you have your tickets, come on in this way. If you need to pick them up at the will call window, head out to the main lobby. But it does connect the building nicely to that, that main parking area. You don't have to walk all around Main Street, so it's nice to have that.
More people print out tickets.
Yeah. And then I had a question on the drawing for option 2. Yeah, the seating. The big one.
Yep.
Okay. So for the boxes that are like in the partial view, how big are those boxes?
So they're a kind of typical gallery or loge seat. They're loose seats.
Okay.
So in a GA event, you take them out.
And then what's next to them here? Is this program space here? I'm sorry. Like here and here?
So that's what I was talking about. This is a Fisher Dax recommendation.
Yeah.
That in earlier studies, we had shown 2 rows on the parterre. They didn't like that as part of the 750 count, but they really liked it as an opportunity for general admissions.
So these boxes are only on the parterre?
These are on the parterre, and these are a step up behind them.
Okay.
So you could put loose seating on them. They're not recommending it as part of the base count because they would be compromised sight lines. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I'm just trying, I'm not super great at picturing that kind of stuff, so that's why I'm trying to ask the clarifying questions, and hopefully if it's too annoying, let me know, I'll stop.
No, go.
And then.
We never stop, you know.
And then the space that's here on the side, I mean, the space that's here on the sides, I guess, if we're looking for more space to have either dedicated gallery or a VIP lounge, is there any way is there enough space to maybe use it as dual purpose without eliminating the seats and just emphasizing the wall?
I'm not sure we would do it there.
I don't
but
know.
the idea of dual purpose spaces is
Yeah.
a conversation that we could be having.
Okay,
But I would say, once we've made a decision and we're moving forward again, we can have that.
okay,
that
that's fair.
And that's how we're doing the gallery in options 1 and 2, is basically, it's part of the lobby, and it's functioning as lobby space, but because it's got good display opportunity, it's the gallery.
And then are there restrooms on the first floor in all of these?
So that's a big difference between SD and option 1 and option 2.
Right.
Option 2 actually distributes the toilet rooms relatively uniformly on 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're none in the basement. In SD and option 1, you have a large number of restrooms in the basement, a couple of unisex on the first floor, and then a modest number on the floors above.
And the stairs in option 2 are where?
Stairs in option, there are 2. One in option 2 is by the Pearl Street entrance, and the other is down right there in fact.
There's,
You're seeing
okay,
it. It's actually in the same location in all 3 schemes.
okay. And I think I've already asked this, but the hanging space that's present here is because of the proscenium that exists in all 3 designs?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I think I'm done.
I know Brandon
Yeah,
has some
Brandon.
questions.
I was just going to aggressively move the conversation forward and say that I actually like option 2 better than the schematic design. I think it's a more intimate experience for the audience members, and I like the fact that it has the 2 entrances. I think it's also, obviously it's cheaper, and I think that if you added in the balcony, it would be a better option from go.
And it has 2 elevators.
And it has 2 elevators. I think it nails everything that I was looking for.
Has more
Kind of
gallery
roof
space
terrace.
too.
Yeah, I think it's a better option.
But he said if he added that back in.
Well, the roof terrace is a couple $100,000 if they could even do it.
That's what I said.
No, it
I
could
got
be
the-
done. It could be done.
But
It's
it will
just-
be done, Ned.
That'd be a big thing for the board.
Yes.
It
yeah.
will be
So,
done.
but I think I would advocate more for the second level balcony, because that's easily done.
But the balcony, how many will?
I have to look at that.
So what I would like to do, and what I was hoping to do, Mary Ann has asked for this a couple of times, is if we can have consensus on one of these options, then the next time we get together, there will be a list with itemized dollar values assessed to it, that you can have a conversation about, we'll add this back in, we won't add that back in. I'd like to try to keep that, consolidated, but if we know if option 2 is what we like, and it's really the roof terrace or whatever else it may be, then we can at least advance the design and we can feel comfortable going down a certain direction. If it's option 1 and you want to have that conversation, then we can do that. So that would be my goal for 2 weeks from now.
That's why I said that, I was trying to inspire that.
But
I had a question with Tracy. Go first.
So just a quick question, to me, one of the major differences with option 2 is no fly space.
That was my question.
Yeah.
So what's the practical impact? Having fly space was a big conversation for us early on in the design. And to go from 59 to 49, although I can understand it would have some impact, didn't feel like it was huge, maybe I'm wrong on that, but to go from 59 to none feels like a major impact on the programming side. So what is the actual day-to-day practical impact of no fly space? What can't we do if we don't have fly space?
It only affects theatrical productions. There's no difference for concerts, there's no difference for comedy, there's no difference for even off-Broadway for the most part, or it used to be rated differently. What you're losing is the traditional theatrical functions, from a technical standpoint, of being able to maneuver sets in and out. Also screens, so we had talked about this a little bit before about if it was a corporate presentation or something like that, and you want the screen to disappear out of the way fly up, you're not gonna be able to do that. There's other tricks of the trade to do that. You can bring in travel tracks from side to side and mask it. You can leave it there. You can, there's other ways to do it, but that theatrical bell and whistle of being able to bring it, fly it out is not a possibility when you've got a 30-foot fixed grid. The rigging is the same, so the distinction there is everything that's hanging on the line sets, or the number of line sets, although SD and 1 or 8-inch versus 12, I think. Anyway, it's relatively small there. But the what's actually up there in the steel is the same. It's how high it is. So you're losing that ability to do some rigging capabilities. I don't see it as a major impact for obviously any of the concerts, any of the comedy. The national touring theatricals that would be targeting this are not going to be, like I said, they're kind of used to doing things that utilize all types of different spaces, so they're quick to be able to do that. I think personally the biggest impact, and this is where I don't have as good a feel as maybe some of you would, is those uses for local, regional players that might want to come in and use it and have a flying capability. That is where I see some impact. And also from a technical standpoint, like I said, on a corporate event or something like that, where you want to be able to fly in screens and that type of thing. But that's the impact.
So do you have to modify the high vac for option 2, because having been on stage a lot with theatrical lights, anybody that has, gets really warm. And if you have no place for that heat to rise to and get blown out, it's going to be really hot on that stage, and then it starts to go into the audience. So do you have to change your high vac capabilities?
No, one, the lighting is LED, so the heat loads are significantly
Even the
less.
theatrical lights are LED?
Yes, yeah. And we are supplying the audience chamber and the stage with HVAC.
Just the other consideration is to keep Elm Street viable. It's like $4.5 million, which nobody has yet. And we don't know what's gonna happen with Elm Street. If we lose Elm Street, now you've got no capability to have any kind of show like that.
Can I just ask a quick question on the risers? When you're talking about the 1.5 foot, I assume you're talking about the two.
I'll go to
I know you said it meant to the angle to which they're coming, but does it put them closer together, less knee space? I mean, do we still have this, because when I'm
No.
looking at it, it looks like this one looks a little closer, but I can't tell if it's just, I'm seeing it wrong, but.
So, a couple things happen. One, and you can see it in the overall floor plan. Previously, we had been showing, and that word just went right out of my head again,
The curve.
could you put the plan up?
Sure.
please?
Parterre?
No. Previously, we had shown the aisles on
Right.
each side.
Right, now you're showing them to the center.
Now we're showing them toward the center. That was through conversations with Pete and his folks, because
I like it.
they want to make sure that people have the shortest possible distance.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
one
that
thing, and
makes
I'm
sense.
glad you brought
I
that up, Ned,
I
because
like
that was
that.
something that was, we were before, from aisle to aisle, going 30 seats. So if you imagine you're in the middle, and this was conversations we had with.
You gotta go by 15 people.
Not
Right,
Yeah.
and now the aisles were wider, you could walk, there was more, 2 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches more, so there was a little bit more of accommodation, so that continental seating plan was, giving some more space to kind of pass by those who may have already been seated. But our concern was that we were going to, that sightline wise, those were gonna be the best seats, right on dead center. But as people looked at the seating map online and be able to select their seats, like, boy, I gotta go in 15 seats to get to the middle. The ability to go, I think where it fully goes out, it's, 6 on each side and 14 or 18 in the middle. So it's the same width, but the aisles are different, which I think is a huge customer service benefit,
Yeah,
to be able to do that.
I agree.
Yeah, so that change allowed this depth to get a little bit shallower, which is in fact how they got the option 2 curved seating to work. The other thing is, the reason why you didn't see the partial view diagrams previously is because that's where the aisles were.
Right, exactly.
And this would be true for every solution. We would go to the inset aisles for Pete's reasoning.
So, but just for clarification, the width between seats has stayed the same, you said?
Yeah, so it would be the 4 inches was forward of
Of,
between
like-
the seats going
Right.
each aisle to aisle. So the width of the seats are still, there's 21s and 22s, I think.
Yep.
Um,
And so the continental seating that Pete's describing
Right,
is when you get up to like 30 seats in a row.
right,
And the code requires more room
room,
To
okay.
get by.
to get by.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
but, so how much have we shortened that room to get by? I'm just thinking about people with long legs,
Yeah,
2 inches.
so it's down to 2 inches from
No,
4?
it's two inches.
went
Shortened
from
by
3'4" to 3, from 3'4" per tier to 3'2" per tier.
Okay. So there's 2 inches.
So everybody's gonna
left.
lose 2 inches
Right, to get.
on their body.
It's still generous.
Yeah, we're good, yeah, we're good.
Still,
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that. It's still generous.
Yeah, yeah, Jim still needs the front row with those long legs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lindsay?
Does option 2 have the ability to add a thrust stage in front? And if so, would that allow for unamplified or better acoustics in an unamplified situation?
So this is my understanding of the unamplified issue. Without bringing in or providing an acoustic shell, none of them are going to be good spaces
Okay.
for that. These are designed because virtually 99% of what's going to be presented in here is amplified. That was a decision that was made early on, that it was too costly to accommodate unamplified. I don't know whether you do that in some of your other venues.
Yeah, usually what's done is a mobile shell. So we talked, of course, about the 2-story permanent fixed shell that would be in there. That's no longer the design, but, mobile shells are available. And usually just a little bit of presence from, miking things to get a little bit of presence, so to have most of it be acoustic, but, or unamplified, but if you need just a little bit of lift to, whether the whole ensemble or a little bit of a tweak to certain instruments, that can be
So
cheated over.
Pete's sort of tweaking the space to make it work without designing it to the
Yeah, but Lindsay, I
highest
think
standards.
that you could,
so.
you know, taking the seats back off the floor and putting an ensemble like that on the floor in front of the stage, or even if there are risers built out, it may be a more intimate space, I think would be definitely possible. And you wouldn't have the same seating capacity, but I think
Yeah,
it would be.
And the
I mean, I would imagine for that
telescopic-
you would need it.
Right, like,
Yeah.
it would be kind of neat to do that.
Yeah, the telescopic seating you can adjust. It doesn't have to be all the way out.
So then you can add the thrust.
Yeah, so is the answer is yes, I can add the thrust. That was the first half of the
Yes.
question that I forgot to get the answer to, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
How long does it take to have everybody out of there in case of an emergency, in case of a problem?
Actually,
A fire.
we haven't done that calculation yet.
Has this been passed by any fire
Yes.
people?
Not your fire department yet, but it has gone through our code consultant.
Yeah.
And that's one of their areas of expertise. Once we start moving again, we will meet with the city again, and make sure that the fire department is on board.
And we have Bill McKinney, and we have Bill McKinney right here. So-
We've been monitoring the progress all the way along, and, you know, as each concept comes to us, we provide our feedback. What we don't want to do is go through several costly,
Reviews.
Designs.
reviews and, you know, alterations to plans as we move forward. We really want to have the answers, you know, all the answers up front.
Yeah,
So
are you in the
when you
fire
finally go to
department?
the drawing board,
Are you in the fire department?
now, I'm with the
With the city.
building safety, but we work closely with the fire marshal's office.
So typically, we would see the building inspector, the fire department, sometimes the police department, and the city engineers.
Nothing?
What's the ceiling height in the basement under the audience chamber in option 2?
It's identical on all of them. It's
Okay.
about 8 feet, I think.
8-ish,
Yeah.
okay.
It's part of the reason why we were sort of quick to abandon the basement.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably great for storage,
Storage.
which we're not going to label it as,
Mhm.
but. You didn't hear that.
Inside voice.
Thank you, Carl.
Do this.
I'd be curious if Mike has any input, since you're right next door, an option 2 might be more of an impact.
So I'm gonna jump in for a second, because I understand that when we were requesting access to your second floor to look at the roof, it didn't get communicated to you that that was implying work on your roof, which it is.
I thought it was because you had to see what the structure was so that you know what you're up against. I did not know that it meant.
No, I apologize for that. That was a telephone operator situation, and Carl, I put you on the spot.
It's an implied snow load on your roof, so we would have to go in, the thought process, like, the easiest way, because of the height
Yeah, it's gonna create.
that's adjacent, it creates a drift. So we have to go in, bring it up to code. And my thoughts, looking at it based on the cavity that you have in it, the way that thing was built, not to get technical, it's gonna be easier to do it from the top down, rather than trying to go in underneath. So try not to disturb whatever we can and see if we can do what we need to do from the top down, re-roof it.
And so the price actually carries an entire new roof on it.
But I didn't roof yet.
Merry Christmas.
But I
You can save us $200,000 if you do your own roof deck.
And that would be, we would obviously, with Carl and his team, completely coordinate that so it doesn't impact your business.
No, you know it's gonna work for us.
But you've been going back, do you have any comments? You've been quiet over there.
Well, I mean, they kind of get answered as we go.
Sure.
You know, a lot of my biggest questions were about the funding part. And, you know, obviously we're wrestling with that. You know, I thought Fred had some pretty strong points about, you know, if we're gonna do this thing, let's do this thing and figure out how, let's just do it and figure out how to get it done once we make the decision. But we're talking about a huge amount of money, and I think there was some strong arguments about, because I didn't like the second plan originally. You know, I just think that from the viewpoint of just optical impact, entering from Main Street with the front to back
Yeah.
stage presentation in my head was always the way to go. But, you know, I do believe there's some good, you know, points brought up about the angle of the seating and making it a more close-up and personal experience. Because I have been to shows also where that was the case. It's a little steeper, which brings you closer to the actual stage, and that's why you go to these events, isn't it?
Yep.
You want to be like right there. And I thought that to me, you know, up until that point, I was kind of like, you know, I felt it was kind of a negative, but I think that's a positive. You know, at the end of the day, we're just gonna be so thrilled to get something built. I mean, whether it's any of these versions, it's gonna be awesome. I didn't love I saw a slight rendition of the exterior on the remodeled one where it goes, you know, drawing two. I have to say that part I did not care for. I love the impact. You know, I still think that maybe this can be handled with lighting or change of materials, things too, but I think it's gonna be still incredibly important that the exterior has a significant wow factor. I don't wanna lose
Is
that.
that option 2 too?
Yeah.
That's option
The first
haven't seen
drawing was so spot on,
That was a good job.
and this one's not as good.
Yeah.
And I know you're working with what you have, but the original one was just
Tim,
really
make
kind of
that bigger.
contemporary and really
Yep.
said it all. So I think that we would want to try to, that's the newer one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's option 2.
You can
Yeah,
just, the
it's-
little arrow off to the right-hand
It's
side.
still,
can
you
get
know
rid of that.
something,
Yeah.
maybe if I hadn't seen the other one first, I would.
Yeah, right.
Like anything else, I,
Yeah.
yes.
But the first one was so dynamic. And I think that's gonna be a big part of it. I think this thing from the outside has to be,
Wow.
Big wow.
A wow, that doesn't have the wow factor.
like I said in some of the
Doesn't
early
mean
meetings, you wanna see it from space, you know?
I know, I
And
agree.
I,
Take glass to the left.
so I think we need this.
Yeah,
Can I-
yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question about option 2 being closer to the stage? I agree with what Brandon says about the closer you are, the better you feel. But I've also been at some theaters when you're right there at the stage and you're looking up like this.
Well, you're gonna get that in the front rows regardless, aren't you?
Not
Well,
always, it depends whether or not they
no,
extend the
stages.
stage, yeah.
Yeah.
So the other one, you have more space, yeah,
If you extend the stage, then you're gonna retract some of the seating
right.
to keep that relationship between the front row and the audience. That front row is what's determining the stage height.
Right.
So FDA lays it out so that the people in the front row are basically able to see the feet of the dancers, if
So,
that's what's going on.
like at the Palace, when they do the stage and they go all the way over the orchestra pit, and I've sat there at times when I'm just kind of like, you're like
Yeah,
this,
it's like
trying
sitting in
to.
the front row of a movie theater.
So sometimes row B and C are a little bit better than
No, I
sitting in
agree,
A.
yeah.
So that's why,
And-
I like being close, but sometimes too close is too
I
close.
think in that case, you know, Pete and his team would be looking at retracting the
Right,
telescopic seating.
which that's kind of nice about the,
Yeah, but now that all that's been brought up, I mean, now that that has been identified as a plus, couldn't that be adapted to the other plans as well?
Yes.
Where you kind of just change the angle? You might even get more seating by doing that?
Probably not, because the height is what's driving it.
You're
Yeah,
going out of room.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, but Tim, can you?
Yep.
No, I was to the exterior,
To the exterior, sure.
and Gloria had something, Rich.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh,
okay,
Well,
go
I was just wondering if you were to turn the seating from option 2 to option 1. So that, because you've got it, when you walk in,
Right, you
you don't
can't.
get the front row. I mean, you can see the stage as you walk in.
You can't get the number of seats if you flip this, if you keep the seating if you turn the seating, you lose this number of seats, right?
Because they're pulling the stage into the,
Right.
If you pull the
Oh,
stage,
correct,
if you
yeah.
pull the stage in
If the
option two,
stage is
in
in
option
that-
one, I'm sorry.
You don't have a lobby.
Lobby.
Because in this one, the back of the audience chamber is close to this wall, so if you rotate that, because the side is square, that's gonna be here. So you'll end up with a little narrow passage along Main Street.
She's got one,
Now-
Harvard has that.
From 2 weeks ago, I believe when I asked, those black lines that look like window panes on the upper left-hand side as I'm looking, no, over.
Keep going to the
over-
left.
Yeah, that's, you said was see-through? Is
That's
it?
where the monumental stair is.
Right,
So,
okay.
yeah.
I guess, and I said this last week, I can live with this, except I don't like that big wall, and I think we
This right
need
here?
to, yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to see some more glass there, so there's some light coming out, but then, is that part of the chamber, the audience chamber?
No, that's actually in the lobby.
Okay,
And this scheme is not nearly as well developed.
right.
right.
We were trying to demonstrate that it doesn't have to be dramatically different as an
Right.
exterior experience.
Okay, so in moving forward, to make it more well-developed, I would like to see more glass
Yep.
and keep the outdoor terrace. I think that, the terrace implies people are gonna be able to go out there and have a drink, or, if there's a snack or whatever.
So that's a terrace right there?
Can I make,
So,
Thank you.
as opposed to having a balcony.
Right, I think,
Because I
yeah.
don't think that's gonna be big.
don't we need to vote on which option we're going to? And if we go on option two and we want to add the
We
the-
could-
do we-
I-
balcony, say, when we come back next week or a week after when we meet, yeah, we've all agreed option two, but we want the outside, so we're gonna add that into that.
Right,
Is
and
that
Mary-
where we are?
And Mary Lou, I just think we need to let Ned know what we want, because if he's gonna go back and redesign, I don't want him to come back and say, well, I think this is what you want. And yeah, we do need to vote on it, but I think people have lots of questions, and I know last night, people were like, oh, we just got this, and then we just got some more today. And, I didn't look at stuff, because I've been in meetings from 9 o'clock this morning till I walked in here. And I didn't see this thing that was sent later until I turned my phone on when I walked in here.
That was
I
adding,
understand.
that was
I-
adding the
And
floor plan.
I do think at some point tonight, we need to make a decision. And I want to thank Tim for sharing some information about the new market tax credits and the lack of options we have now that we have this non-binding, it was a non-binding vote at 15.5 million, but it's being taken as more of a binding commitment. And so I think that's important for us to
Can you explain
understand.
non-binding and the binding?
Well,
the
that was
different-
just kind
the
of
vote.
giving us, testing the water when
Right.
we put out, 4 million of private money and a 15.5 million bond.
That's not,
That was, we weren't held to that.
it's advisory.
Yeah.
It was
Oh.
advisory.
It was the vote.
So,
We
I mean,
put on
in
the
our
vote.
It was
mind,
your,
in our mind, it was like, yeah, the community's saying, yeah, the majority. But listening to Tim tonight, because that's the number we've been talking about and working with, it's much more solid in terms of how it's being viewed financially than I think we've been viewing it. And I think that's important for us to understand as we look at the financing here.
So I just want to clarify that. You're absolutely right. What I was trying to head off, and maybe this is a better way of saying it, is I don't want anyone to be thinking around the table that, sure, we'll approve the project for an additional $4 million because we will try to get the new market tax credit money and maybe we'll never use
Right.
that authorization. I wanted to take that off the table because I didn't want anyone walking out of the room here tonight saying, oh yeah, I'll be good with, authorizing up to $19 million because we'll still have the new market tax credit money. I want folks to realize that that source of funds would most likely come off the table.
Right, and that's the first time I have heard that, or I've processed that, if it's been shared before, and so I think that kind of changes how those of us who have to vote on funding
Yeah, right.
look
Yeah.
at this.
So
Yep.
what's the minimum threshold for bonding where you still get to use the tax credits?
So it's not a minimum threshold, though I will tell you that a lot of these groups like to see the projects between 10 and 15 million. That's the conservative approach to take, to only work with one group instead of multiple groups. But the real issue is the percentage of the project cost, because they look to fill gaps in projects.
That's what I'm talking about.
So they like to see 70 to 75% sources
Covered.
committed, and they'll come in with somewhere between 20 and 30% of the capital to help close the gap to bring it to 100%. And so this right now at 15.5 is about 20-25% of the source of funds. And so if we then authorize it to be, let's say 90-95%, whatever it may be, they're not gonna be looking at us as a worthy project. They have to fulfill a federal requirement, but for these funds, this project won't happen.
Great, Tracy?
So one last question as I'm looking through the differences, because yes, I agree, we do need to take a vote, and I just want to make sure I understand before I vote. So the restrooms in the basement difference, does that, and I apologize if I missed it in the conversation, are we adding additional restrooms elsewhere, or are we losing restrooms?
Same number.
Relocating, just not in the basement?
Redistributing
Got it.
them differently.
Okay. Which arguably isn't as big a deal if we don't have any programming down there.
Right.
Any more bathrooms down there become less of an issue.
It
But we're
might
not
be a
losing
benefit.
overall number of,
In fact, it's better because there are more on
Yeah, there's more on the
Yep.
on the
Yeah, okay.
occupied
Yeah,
floors.
and Tracy, I think last week, in looking at this, one of the things, and Ned talked about it a bit, is that we're not going into the apartment building, so it gives us that ability to distribute restrooms and have lobbies and have all that space, because we're not cutting into the apartment building at all.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I'm only here to answer your questions. We are not advocating for any one of these.
Mhm.
Yeah, we, as I said last time, are absolutely committed to showing you a path to an on-budget project. Then it's up to you as to, weigh the benefits.
So that's actually a good segue to,
Yes.
I promised you, and this is at very high level still, but here are some ideas that I've been playing around with about trying to close a $1 million gap in the budget. So we don't need any decisions tonight, but none of these are gonna get you $1 million, but you could get a couple $100,000 from some of these sources and less in other sources. Charge for additional parking during the night of performances in the parking garages. That's something I would wanna vet with Pete to make sure we didn't cause any problems, but if we just used the D1 designation at $1 per hour in the garages, that would be like $3 to $5 that we otherwise don't charge right now. I don't think that that's terribly scary, but it's something to think about as maybe a way of moving this forward and not charge, no, I'm gonna say this, but I guess it depends on how you interpret it, not charge the property taxpayers money by increasing the bond. It's an alternative revenue source, not going out and to the taxpayers. Another one is, we're carrying 1.2. Do we need to carry that much money in the endowment? Can we reduce it by 200,000 to maybe $1 million? Request some CDBG funds, though I will note that this shouldn't be part of the project. It would have to be after this project is completed. You'd go for an individualized thing, a second elevator, or whatever it may be, and try to seek those funds. And I do know it's not a popular choice.
Can you,
Well,
can
well,
you define the acronym for?
It's Community Development Block Grant Funding. The city of Nashua is an entitlement community, so we get funding every year from HUD. What do we have, about 350,000 this year to disperse, so 1 year of, maybe putting some towards this.
just.
And it's in the lowest census tract area, so
Correct, it is.
it would probably
qual-
qualify.
It would,
Right.
it would qualify, but I still
Yeah.
don't think perceptually it's.
That's what it
Now
was
when you,
designed
now
for.
when you, yeah, it was designed for that, but not when you're thinking about other.
We don't need to come to any
Yeah, right,
conclusions
that's-
this evening. I just told you,
I would just go through the list.
here's some ideas, So one thing, maybe, just to kind of throw this out on the table, we have been talking for 2 or 3 years now about selling or leasing the School Street parking lot for development, maybe taking the proceeds from that sale and directing it into this project, just an idea. So this one's not gonna be popular, but I need to put it on the table. Special assessment on, on Main Street, so for the property tax.
Wow. Thank you.
Okay, you just lost 2 people.
Great.
Well, Rich, how many buildings do you have? How many buildings do you have?
I have 2 buildings in Main Street.
Yeah.
So you alone.
Plus a parking lot.
And a parking lot, yeah.
I'll say the parking lot.
Well, maybe we don't have to go as high, as far as.
Especially.
How special.
They'll
I
come
mean-
over and give you a shoulder
Alright.
massage.
This one might be a little bit more serious, and it really goes to a community value, and I don't know whether the community would want to do it or not, but look at outside advertising for some revenue. Something to think about. I'm not saying a billboard per se, but something along those lines.
Well, we're gonna use that big empty space on the front of the building.
Well,
I mean, it's something to bring in revenue, it's something to think about, but I know some communities are very sensitive to having billboards, so it's something that you should really have a strategic thought on whether you'd want to introduce it or not. Would it set a precedent? Because, do you want us to do it, how do you say no to someone else? Because Rich Landon will come in right after and want a billboard on his roof.
I fought for the Enterprise building. That was on the Enterprise, so-called billboard, but it's not a billboard.
I'll be honest with you, the billboard that's up at the top of the hill, Library Hill, that you see there, I get a lot of people who complain about those.
So,
As
but-
you come into downtown.
Again, my job is to try to point out some alternative revenue sources for you. Increased lease parking fees, we know we're below market.
Brandon will take care of that.
We know we're below market. If we were to just increase the fees to something more reasonable, to be what's comparable for the marketplace, you could dedicate those additional net proceeds into the project. That would be subject to not just Board of Alderman action, but you need Downtown Improvement Committee to commit to that. The other one is something I would need to explore a little bit further, but one that I think has some potential is, we do have some brownfields money available to us. I believe we could argue that this building could be a perceived brownfield with some hazardous material in it. It would only be the hazardous material that would qualify for the grant. That could be,
Could you please define that again?
A brownfield?
Alderman people. I don't know what that means.
What's the question?
I don't know what
What
that
is a
is.
brown?
A brownfield is just a contaminated site. A site that, and it's statutorily, it's
Okay.
contaminated or perceived to be contaminated.
Okay.
And that stigma would allow you access to certain type of funding, typically provided through the EPA. The city of Nashua is the beneficiary of an entitlement through the EPA for a grant program. We could potentially access some of those funds. We could cobble together some of these sources, but it would all take an approval process. We would need to do all these approvals in advance of the new market tax credit award, because they would want to know it's in place. But we could pursue all of this and help get that extra $1 million, if that was of interest, to get the design that folks are comfortable with.
I think we should be pursuing regardless of what we choose, if those are options, Money is money.
But
Green is
there's
green.
political consequences to all of them, and
Right.
we
Yeah, I
need
don't know
to.
if I'm that cavalier
Now
about
you
it, to
tell
be
us.
honest with you.
So,
Where's the $1 million gap come from? I don't get it.
The what?
The 1 million, what does it represent?
Except for the stuff
I was
on
just
the side.
using rough numbers to show the difference between option 1 and option 2. That's all.
Okay, with everything else?
Yeah, it's $1 million gap between those 2 options,
Yeah.
roughly.
So,
Mike,
Michael has a question.
You guys probably have talked about this at other meetings, but maybe not. I went on GoFundMe to see if there was anything established for this, and the only thing was the one that somebody did when Brian passed, where there was some money that went into that at the very beginning, but if you looked at, it showed the timeline, nothing's gone into that in quite some time. And to me, I'm like, every time you turn around and these GoFundMe things, they raise a lot of money if they're handled properly. And, you know, and I'm not even opposed to leaving it in Brian's name or whatever, or we can start another one. I don't know which is the right way, but with the right social media campaign and networking that is in this room, that times whoever, many people, everybody in this room knows, you can really get that moving again, and I don't know why that's not being utilized so far.
Tracy?
It's a very easy way to raise money.
So a challenge with that perhaps with a lot of planning in advance could be overcome, is that you risk, and that's an awkward word to use, but you risk somebody donating to a GoFundMe that is targeted for a larger gift as part of the capital campaign. And
I don't think you worry about that.
but you need to, and I'll just say that given my experience in capital campaigns for 20 years, if you, it often happens that someone will donate, which in a GoFundMe thing would be a very large gift, let's say $5,000 or even $10,000.
Yeah.
They may be identified as a prospect for example, $5,000 a year for 5 years, or $10,000 a year for 5 years. And if they've already given to a GoFundMe, it becomes virtually impossible to approach them for that multi-year gift, which is a typical capital campaign gift. So we would be leaving money on the table by doing that too soon. We would want to make sure that all of the people we felt were capable of making significant gifts, and I think in our verbiage, that's probably $10,000 or more, have been approached before we did what would be considered a more public approach of a GoFundMe. I do think once the public phase really gets underway that it does make sense to do that again. I've been in a position where we've actually turned a gift away that came in too early with a capital campaign for another local organization because we knew that person was capable of and likely to give it a much higher level when approached correctly. And the biggest difference there is capital campaign gifts, as a general rule, are multi-year gifts, and a GoFundMe isn't a multi-year mechanism. That's really a caution before considering doing that.
And I, just quickly, Judy, it's part of the capital campaign, which is a few of us here. There is going to be a public phase, and that could very well be part of the public phase. It should be, but we're not there yet.
That's what I was gonna say.
We're just not there yet. So right now, we're doing the individual ask of that, the larger, the 5-6 figures. The public phase will come.
Yeah,
And
when
we
the
already
time
have-
comes, you actually have to have somebody who does media, social
Yep.
media relations.
We have
Yes.
that in the plan,
Absolutely.
believe me, and
Yep.
a very good idea of how to do it that can raise quite a bit of money.
Absolutely.
We've been working with Paul Shea on it, and we have an audience. We're just waiting for the right time to do the
We're starting to
fundraising.
lose people.
I just
Okay.
was surprised
Yeah.
that there wasn't one yet, that's why.
Yeah.
I said, I wonder, and I looked it up and I saw Brian's.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my
That's real.
daughter-in-law that put that together.
Yeah.
And that's really why, it's purely, it's not a good idea, we're not quite at the point where we wanna do that at this point.
We only got about 10 minutes, and a couple of people have to leave now. We're now 7, so we do want to go back to, I guess, a vote of
Yes.
1 versus 2.
Yeah, exactly, that's right.
What's your vote?
Yeah,
Put it
or
on the
vote,
spot
or vote
first.
right now.
Mary Lou,
Mary
Mary
Lou,
Lou,
Are we doing this as a formal, Tim? We would like a motion on the table?
Yep.
We already had one, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't
We
a
have to
formal
make a
motion, so yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, I guess. Should I make a
Sure.
motion?
Yeah.
All right. I guess motion for option 1, and then we'd vote.
You
So
said
you want
option
option 2?
You said option
Just
2.
the
All right,
option you
option 2. All
prefer.
right.
So,
Well, I
yeah.
prefer option 2, and
Yeah.
my motion is to accept option 2. It'll pursue
Okay.
option 2.
I second it.
Second by Judy.
All right. All in favor?
I was gonna say, brief discussion,
Oh, yeah,
with the
any
caveat that I'm not in love with the exterior presentation at this
And we
point.
want a
It
deck.
doesn't, it's not at the level that the original schematic was. And with that as part of the discussion and caveat,
Duly noted.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Note for the record, one
No.
in opposition.
I really
Okay.
don't like it.
So move for option 2, knowing that we want to approve, look at some, little bit of change, yeah, maybe be a little more attentive to the
There's gonna
outside.
be some more fine.
And obviously, we're gonna be looking at more numbers to see, okay, it's option 2, but do we still add in a
Other
roof deck
things
or
and-
one or two or three other items?
I just feel like we're gonna add things in and we're gonna end up with option 1.
Well,
Well,
that's a total.
Without being turned, so.
That
that's
is a
my-
concern that I have.
Yeah, and that's the issue, is we did, now what we did was we bought something that, not
But-
quite what we wanted, we're gonna add all these things in, and we're gonna have the same cost as option 1, but that's just my
Well,
opinion.
respectfully, I actually do want
Not
to
be
be
an option one and still add all those.
They're better.
But there's not as
That-
many
that's
things.
a better
we
layout.
have.
Really liked the
Well,
orientation.
That gallery.
You're not gonna know the difference.
One gallery,
Terrace
more
on
intimate, you
option.
can fit more people,
Yeah.
so you win on every single, other than having fly space.
Mark's gonna
And
get
he
this.
says-
One is a
Right,
hundred.
attention,
Add another.
hello, everybody.
I make a
Hello,
motion.
hello.
My motion to adjourn,
Is there anything else to discuss as far as next meeting date?
No.
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks
will
from
not be
tonight,
here.
there'll be another meeting at 5 o'clock.
Chamber
I
of
would love.
Any other quick comments?
Hang on, but that's just.
motion to
Well, hang
adjourn.
on, is he looking at his meeting?
Ned, I won't be able to be there.
Is Ned looking at a calendar?
Yeah, we're looking at calendars right now.
If you can do it the week after instead of 2 weeks.
I like that.
You like that?
It's a we've got a chamber event on the second Wednesday of every month, and it's been forever, and I can't be here. I run that event.
You're
I
looking at can't the
not be
17th?
here.
Is that what you're saying, the July
I
17th?
favor the 17th.
17th.
I can do that.
I won't be.
17th?
Yeah, I can.
Now, let me make sure
I
I
have
can
a-
I
make
have
the
no,
17th.
I have no idea.
Tim,
I don't
I have
make
a
calendars.
neighborhood meeting.
Yes, I could make the 17th.
But no, we'll have it start at 7 or something.
Perfect, I was gonna say, have it start at 7. Because we'll all go from this to that.
They were there when I was first starting.
At 5 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
5 PM.
Okay.
I can do that if you can make it that day.
The
Okay.
Majority, so July 17th, 5 o'clock will be the next meeting. Anything else, anybody at the table? Not, motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Second?
Thank
Okay.
Now
Thank
that
you,
we're,
everybody.
I'll say what I-